You are listening to Weight Loss Made Real, and this is episode 225. I'm your host, Master Weight Loss Coach and author, Cookie Rosenblum. Today and every Tuesday, I'm here to be your coach and your guide to help you end your emotional eating and lose that extra weight. If you just found me, welcome. And if you're a regular listener, welcome back, my friend. Here is where we work together to end your emotional eating and habitual overeating, and this is the main focus of all the work I do. This is weight loss for the thinking woman who's smart enough to know what doesn't work and is willing to dig a little deeper to make lasting change. Here is where coaching meets psychology and psychology meets brain science, and this is where your problem ends. Today, I'd like to share an interview with you with Amber. And Amber is a mentor of the Freedom Group. You've all heard me talk about the Freedom Group, and that is our monthly coaching membership for smart women who want support and guidance and learning and understanding new ways of looking at eating and weight. So Amber is a former member of the program. She's been through the whole program herself, and now she is a mentor. And what a mentor does is help other members make progress and support them along their journey. I want you to listen to Amber's story because there's lots in it that you will relate to. Amber struggled as a young teen and felt a lot of the cultural pressure that many of us feel to lose weight, even though she really probably didn't need to. She went through periods where she really restricted her food, trying to fit this cultural norm, didn't eat enough, and that led to a full-blown eating disorder. But here's the good news. Amber overcame this style, the style of restricting and then binging, restricting and binging. It's such a hard path to change, but she did it. And I admire her journey so much. She tried many things, including therapy, and this is a story of how she came to understand her own mind, her own brain, her own habits, why she formed them, and how to change them. And as a result of all the work that she did, she created a whole new relationship with food and her body and herself. So here today, we're with Amber telling her story. Listen with me and hear what it was like for her and how far she has come. All right, let's dive into our chat with Amber. Okay, well, thank you all for joining me today because we have a special guest. And I know from a lot of the emails that I get that a lot of you love to listen to the experiences of people who are actually in the Freedom Group. And today, as I described, I have Amber. And Amber not only was a Freedom Group member, but now is part of Team Freedom, which is our mentors who work in the Freedom Group, helping other members make progress, and they help support them along their journey. So let's give a big welcome for Amber. Amber, thank you so much for doing this podcast with me.
Yeah, hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be on the podcast. You know, it's such a big podcast, and it played such a huge role in my journey, too. And I love being a mentor, so I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. So why don't we just start with a little introduction about, your background, what you struggled with and what you've tried in the past and how you came to find me and the Freedom Group.
Yeah, so I'll start from the very beginning. My food struggles started when I was about 14, and it started because I was restricting food. I wasn't overweight or anything, but I just decided that, the societal pressures told me to lose weight, so I decided I wanted to lose weight. So I started calorie counting and restricting my food, and I was not eating enough at all for my growing body. So I was losing weight, but I needed more food and I wasn't eating enough. So that's when I started binge eating. And, it was just my body's way of trying to protect me. So I started binge eating around 15 or 16 after a few years of dieting. and I mainly just calorie counted. And after I started binge eating, I was just horrified because I just thought, oh my gosh, I was trying to lose all this weight and then I'm binge eating, like this is not good. Yeah.
So trying to lose the weight led you into something even more serious, an actual eating disorder.
Right. And I remember so vividly the first time I ever binged, it was on 7 cookies. And at that point, it was like my whole calorie amount for the day. So that was the first time I actually ever threw up. And I was diagnosed with bulimia a few months later. And I went to therapy for bulimia, but it didn't really help me. I didn't understand the questions they asked me, or it just, nothing really made sense to me. And that's when I discovered Katherine Hansen. And at that point, I wasn't purging anymore. It was just the binge eating. So I found Katherine Hansen, and I did her program through Brain Over Binge, which you were actually a part of in 2016, I think it was.
Yes, Katherine is a good friend and a colleague and has a brilliant book called Brain Over Binge. And I'm so glad at that point, Amber, that you found her, because before you worried about body image and other things that you worked on later on, you needed to really get a hold of that binge eating.
Right. So that was really a monumental part of my journey. And that really did help me stop the binge eating part of it. And I thought I was good for a while and I wasn't really binge eating, but I still had a really bad relationship with food. And this really came out once I went to college a few years later. And as I went to college, I just realized I had zero trust in my body. I was in a new environment. I didn't know how to really eat or trust what I was eating. And so that's when I started overeating again. I had the occasional binge. It wasn't as severe as it was before, but that's when I realized that I wasn't going down the path that I wanted to go down. And I was gaining weight and I just didn't know what to do. So that's when I found you.
So when you say you had a really bad relationship with food at that point, could you give me an example? What was it like?
Yeah, when I ate, it wasn't like a big struggle, but I always felt guilty after I ate. And I always felt like, I was doing something wrong. And I would see my friends around me who were eating, and it just seemed like so easy for them. It didn't seem like there was any struggles. And when I started overeating again, I just knew that the amounts I was eating was not normal, and it didn't feel good in my body either. It just, being overly full is never fun. You can't do what you want to do. And then there was the weight gain. So it was really just, I didn't feel like I knew how to eat normally.
Right. Were you restricting at that point? Were you counting calories?
Not really. I had stopped counting calories a few years before college, but it was more just, I think, the loss of control when I went to college, that I wasn't able to, just control everything I ate. And I had to go to the dining halls where there was endless desserts and whatever food I could ever want. And I didn't know how to deal with all that food because I never really allowed myself much of it before.
Right. On top of being away from home and having to manage your whole life, right? And make lots of decisions every day. On top of that, the whole area of food and eating, which you had struggled with previously, it must have made it really uncomfortable for you.
Yeah, for sure. It was just such a new time for me, and, all the new stresses of starting college and a new life. So it definitely was not a fun experience to start college with.
Yeah, a lot of stress. And it's almost like self-induced stress, right? I mean, college presents all kinds of challenges, especially in the beginning. But on top of that, it was the way that you were thinking about food and your body and your eating that really added to the whole picture of stress.
Yeah, it just took up so much of my time, and I was constantly researching what I could do to stop some of my habits and how I could change my eating, but nothing was working.
So what kinds of things did you try? I mean, were you able to label what you were doing? Did you know, I'm an emotional eater, or I have different eating habits that I want to change? Did you know what it was you even wanted to change?
So I'd heard the term emotional eater a lot, and I know it's thrown around a lot, and especially the weight loss community. But for some reason, that never really resonated with me as much as the habitual overeater did. And that's what really seemed to me, because, I would eat when I was happy, but also sad. And it didn't seem to be correlated to my emotions as much as it was something like the time of day or an event. So one of my big things that I did was after a meal, I'd always have to have something after. Like it wasn't just I had the meal and then I was done. It was I had the meal and then I had a protein bar. Or I had the meal and then I had dessert. Or I had the meal and then I had some crackers on top of it. So that was one of the big things that I wanted to stop.
Right. So it was like a habit of I eat the meal and then I keep going.
Yeah. There was never an end.
Right. And when you would do that, were you very stuffed or did you just get used to that kind of full feeling?
I wasn't necessarily super stuffed, but I was always it was too much. Like it just felt like, oh, that was, a few bites too many but that was at every meal. So of course it added up. And one of my other things was I was so terrified of being hungry. I would eat a snack like religiously every 3 hours because I thought that if I didn't do that, I'd learned, I'd probably binge. Like I didn't want to get hungry because maybe that meant I was going to binge. Right. That mindset, it served me in the beginning when I did need to stop restricting and, gain a little bit of my weight back. But after, 5 years of being recovered from bulimia, I didn't need that thought anymore. And so it really didn't serve me to be eating every 3 hours. Even if I wasn't hungry, I was just terrified of what would happen when I was hungry.
Yes. And as you know, the women that we work with in the Freedom Group, a lot of them also have that panicky feeling when they get hungry. Mm-hmm. And I think if they have a background similar to yours, that it might be, if I don't get enough food, that might cause me to binge and I don't want to go back there. But I think that you've seen that a lot of people in general, even if they don't have that bulimia background, they're just afraid of being hungry.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's something I see a lot. And I think one of the biggest things that helped me with that is realizing that, hunger is just a natural part of life. Like nothing bad's going to happen. No one's going to die just because you're hungry for a few hours. And if you're really, really hungry, your body will let you know. It's not going to let you starve.
Right. It will fade away and then it will come back to make sure you know that you have to feed yourself. But it's not usually an emergency, particularly if we're living in a world where we have enough to eat.
Yeah, there's always food around us.
Yes, usually for most of us. So how did you come to me? Let's keep hearing that story. You were eating every 3 hours because you thought that would be like a good prescription to not sink back into binge eating.
Yeah, so I came to you after I listened to your podcast and I had remembered you from Katherine Hansen. So I started listening to your podcast and everything just resonated with me so much. And I really loved how it focused on not just what we were eating, but, why were we eating? And just all the concepts that resonated with me were all about like the brain and why was this happening to me? Not from just, I'm eating too much sugar, but, what are my thoughts about my eating? So I found you through your podcast. And then a few months later, I signed up for the Freedom Group.
Yes, I remember you and I corresponded a bit, right, before you joined, because you actually asked a lot of very intelligent questions to make the decision. And I think that you knew you had an idea of what you needed, but even more importantly, you knew what you didn't need. You didn't want a strict diet. You didn't want to just focus on what to eat, but it was more, as you're saying, why am I wanting to eat, when I'm not hungry? And why do I have these habits? So you come into the Freedom Group and it's going to be different. And it's not going to give you a diet or an eating prescription with times and amounts. And I think it sounds like, Amber, you had been pretty strict with yourself.
Yeah, it was more about I was really scared of what would happen if I did, let control of what I'd been doing before. So I was scared of what would happen if, I did have some treat foods, or what would happen if I did allow myself to, stop when I was full and eat when I was hungry. So I was really hesitant about the general method, but I knew that it was going to be better than if I were to do a diet. So at first I was really nervous, but I was also really hopeful because everything resonated with me a lot in your podcast and what I learned from you in Bring Over Binge. So I was really hopeful, but also a little bit hesitant.
Right, because we were not giving you exact prescriptions for what to eat, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that you've struggled with, based on what you're saying, is that desire to like be in charge, right? To really feel like you're in control, because that makes all of us feel secure. Here we are saying, okay, Amber, we're not going to tell you what to eat. We're not going to tell you what time, and we're not going to tell you how much, but you're going to base it on your hunger. And what did you think when you heard that?
I knew it was what I needed to do in the long term, but I think when people first start listening to their hunger and fullness signals and trying to eat from -2 to +2 on the hunger scale, it can feel really uncertain and it can feel really scary because you're not really sure what those signals felt like, especially if you've been ignoring them for a long time. So it was a little bit different for me. And I remember I almost overthought it to the point where I was like, every 15 minutes, I was like, is this hunger? Is it not?
Right.
But over time, it got a lot easier. And I recognized that I didn't need to have it down perfectly. Like, it's not going to be the perfect, now is the exact time I'm hungry, but sometimes it's a little more subtle. So over time, I got the hang of it. But at first, it was a little difficult.
Yes. And it is in the beginning for some of the people. I think for a lot of people who've been listening to me for a while and have been practicing listening for physical hunger on their own, they know what we're saying. But a lot of people come in and it's a very insecure feeling in the beginning because they think that not having a diet means there's no guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But that's the opposite of the way that we operate.
Right. Yeah. And I thought it was really cool how I got to create my own guidelines and I got to figure out what worked for me, which is definitely the longer process because instead of someone just telling you right then and there what you need to do, you have to figure it out for yourself a little. But I was able to figure out, what the right amount of food was for my body and what really worked.
So do you mind sharing what some of your guidelines maybe were? And was there any change in them from when you started till now?
Yeah, for sure. I think I started just with the -2 to +2. So starting when I was a little bit hungry and then ending when I was a little bit full. And I started just by waiting till I was hungry, which was a big experience for me because, like I said, I was really scared of what would happen. So my first step was kind of overcoming that fear of it's okay to be a little bit hungry, like nothing bad is going to happen. And then I later focused on how to stop overeating and get to a place that felt good in my body. And those are the two I focused on the most in the beginning. And then as time went on, I focused on a little bit more about like what foods felt good in my body. And that has changed over time too. At the beginning, I was really stuck on sugar for a while. And I thought the whole world was telling me that sugar, is going to make you feel bad. Like immediately after you eat sugar, you're not going to feel good. So I had a hard time kind of figuring that out and what I wanted to do. But I really just tried to let go of any external advice on what I should do about sugar. And after a while, and now I'm just definitely at that place where I know that, you don't want to be eating it all day, obviously, but I know the amount that feels good for me. And I know that I can have, a cookie now and be satisfied after a few bites, which is a lot different than not having a cookie for a few days and then having 10 of them all at once.
Right. Because now that despite me not telling you how many cookies you should have and when, that you are in charge of your eating.
Mm-hmm.
So the 3 guidelines were waiting till you're hungry to eat, stopping when you're no longer hungry, when you're nicely satisfied. And then the 3rd guideline is what to eat. What was the hardest one of those 3 for you to master?
Probably the stopping part, followed by the what to eat. Yeah. And something I found that's been really helpful for me with that is the mindful eating part of it, where, you really focus on just what you're eating in that moment and not eating distracted or standing or on the go. That part has played a huge part of my journey because I think a lot of times with especially treats and stopping with those, it can be really hard when you're just grabbing a candy bar out the door and you don't think about actually savoring and enjoying it. So a big part of me my progress has been able to sit down like at my meal with my food and just really eat it slowly and mindfully and be present with it, as opposed to just shoving a treat down on my way out the door and then not remembering it.
Right. So you actually enjoy your food more because you're giving it the attention that it needs.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people think, oh, I need to be giving food less attention. But when you're truly trying to tune back into your body and figure out what to do, it's so important, I think, to have that time to just sit down and focus on only the food and nothing else.
Yes. And one of the things I see a lot of people write about in the beginning when they're new to the group is they'll say, I'm frustrated because I don't want to be thinking about food all the time. And I think that's a misconception when you're eating like a natural eater to wait for hunger and stop when you're satisfied, is that you don't go around every 10 minutes saying, am I hungry? Am I hungry? You go about your life, right? You go about your life doing what you're going to do until your body gives you like a wake up call and says, oh, wait a minute, time to get something to eat. Is that where you feel you are now?
Yeah, for sure. It's the only time that I really think about food. And I mean, I have to plan ahead. So you do think about food then. But when, you realize you get hungry, then you start thinking about food. And then when I sit down to eat, I start thinking about my food while I'm eating it. But other than that, I've just found so much more joy in other things in life and really finding those things I love to do that aren't just thinking about food all day.
A while back when you started, I remember that one of the issues you had, I may not be remembering it exactly, but one of the things that you struggled with was how to deal with being around groups of friends and what they were eating and not feeling like you needed to join in or you wanted to join in if it was not time for you to eat. Do you remember that?
I do. Yeah, a big part of college, is the friends and the friend groups, and you all go out to eat, and sometimes you're just not hungry. And that was kind of hard for me because I wanted to eat with everyone. But a big part of that has just been planning ahead and making sure that if I do have plans to eat out, or I know that there's going to be a dessert at one night that I really want to have, I'll make sure that I'm hungry by that time. So I'll make sure that I don't overdo it at lunch or I don't have an afternoon snack. So that way I ensure that when I am with those people that I'm hungry. And another thing is if for some reason I'm not hungry at that time, I found over lots of practice, but that I can just have a good conversation with them. And I've made, the food experience not just about the food, but about being around people that I love and care about and want to have a conversation with.
Well, both of those things, managing your hunger so that you're hungry when you want to be hungry, like for an event or a restaurant or get together, but also being able to just be with other people eating. Those are two amazing accomplishments, Amber, because most people feel like the people they're with or the time of day, that's going to determine when they eat and that they have no choice. It's just too hard. But yet you're doing it.
Yeah, and it definitely is difficult at first because you're not used to doing it. And it was just really important to me to make like the dining experience about more than just the food. And it really is about, you're not going out to eat just to eat, but you're going out to like hang out with people and see the people you haven't seen for a while.
So did anyone ever notice and call you on it and say, what are you doing? Why aren't you eating? Or what's happening with you?
Yeah, no, not really. And if they do, I'm just, say, oh, I'm not hungry right now. And that's it, if they usually don't press on about it.
Right. I think it's kind of funny that when we say to people, they'll offer us food and we'll say, I'm not hungry, they just stop offering. But if we say, well, I'm trying not to eat that, I'm trying to be good, I'm on a certain eating plan, that's when they say, oh, come on, just a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think the phrase I'm not hungry usually shuts them down.
Yes, I would agree. So when did you get to the point where you started to feel confident in your ability that, hey, you're actually doing it? You're managing yourself, your hunger, your eating. How long did it take you to get to that point?
I definitely noticed a difference almost immediately as soon as I started doing the program and doing the work. But it took I was in the feeding group for the whole year, went through the whole program. And I'd say around 9 months is when I really started to see the differences and think that, oh, I am a natural eater and this is actually working. And I had lots of little wins along the ways, but it was a process to change my old thoughts and my old habits. So it did take some time and I needed some patience with that. But luckily, I was able to have that patience and not give up. And I was able to become a natural eater.
Yes, you certainly have. So that reminds me, I want to ask you, I hear the changes in your eating and I hear the changes in how you look at food. How did you deal with the think part of the program? The program is Eat, Think, Love. And we talked quite a bit about eat. Tell me about what you learned or what's changed for you in the think area.
Yeah, for sure. So when I started it, the Freedom Group, I remember one of the lessons on think, I just thought, oh, this isn't that important. And I kind of just skimmed over it and skipped it. But I later realized that that was one of the most important lessons. So I went back through it and I really examined what was happening and how think worked. And, no one is really aware of how their brain works until they take a deep look in it. And I now joke around that I know more about my brain and my thoughts that I ever thought would be possible. But yeah, the think part was really important to me, I think, later on in the journey, because when you start out, everyone is just so concerned with, okay, just I'm joining this to figure out how to become a natural eater. How am I going to eat? But then you later on realize that how you eat is determined by your thoughts. So therefore you need to do the work on think. Yeah, and exactly. I really learned, the emotions part was a big thing for me in learning that I can feel my emotions and not have to push them away or get mad about them. And just learning how to work through those was really big for me. And I've started using the program in so many other areas of my life too. And once you get a little grip on eat, it can just expand through everything.
And you really got good at being able to put your finger on what you were feeling and going backwards to be able to identify what you were thinking, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just good mood, bad mood. You're able to really look at what's going on for you and name, I'm feeling blank because I'm thinking blank.
Yeah, exactly.
You did really, really well with that. And tell me about the love part. And when we say love in the Freedom Group, what we're really talking about is self-love, self-care. So it's 1/3 of the program because a lot of people use food as self-care. But when we give ourselves more food than our body actually needs, it's not a good solution. So tell me about your experience with the love part of the program.
Yeah, so love was kind of the same thing as think, where I overlooked it at first, but later realized its importance. And I thought a lot of people think that self-care is just, oh, I'm going to do more bubble baths and wear a face mask most nights and do all the traditional things that we define as self-care. But I later learned to realize that, love and self-care can be so much more than that. And it's, making time for yourself and giving yourself breaks throughout the day or going for a walk or going to the gym because it feels good. And so I really learned how to make myself and my needs a priority, where I didn't do that as much before. It was more just kind of, whenever I'm low on energy or if I'm at rock bottom, then I'll give myself a break and then I'll take care of myself and then I'll do the things I like. But I learned that, you need to give those things to yourself all the time.
Yes. And a lot of people fight us on that. Would you agree with that? I think they think either think or love are, as you said, the least important parts.
Yeah, I would agree. And same thing with think, but the love will expand into all areas of your life. So you just learn how to be kinder to yourself, because when you're taking care of yourself, you realize that you're your most important person in your life. So it's important to take care of you.
Exactly. Yep. You got it. You've really done well putting all the pieces together.
Thank you.
On your journey in the group, did you ever have any major slips? Did you ever backslide? Did you ever feel like, I don't know if I could do this, or I don't know if this is working?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I think if you expect to go into it with the idea that this is going to be it, and this is just, I'm going to sign up and everything's going to be fixed, then you're going to be disappointed, because a lot of learning comes from falling down and seeing what you did wrong and what you want to do differently. So I had definitely a lot of slips, especially in the beginning, but over time I got so much better with dealing them. And a big part of that came from not beating myself up. So normally if I would overeat, I would be super mad about myself. I would journal, I would cry. It would just be a big emotional mess afterwards. But even now, on occasion, I still overeat. And it's just more like, oh, I ate a little bit too much food. All right, moving on. And it doesn't have to be this big whole thing about, oh, I'm a failure, this isn't working. It's just part of the process.
Right. So you don't beat yourself up. You don't blame yourself. In fact, we have a process to learn from a slip, to look at what went well, what didn't work, and what to do differently next time. So it just becomes a quick little mental checklist.
Yes. And I use that worksheet all the time just as a way, because then you feel like you're doing something, you got back on track or you got back to what you wanted to do, and then you can move on.
So were you surprised when we approached you to be part of the team?
I was very surprised, but I was also very excited because I knew how impressed I was with myself for being able to get through this journey and, find food freedom. And so when I got the opportunity to help others as well and show them my story and give them advice, it was a big excitement for me. I was really happy to do it.
And what Amber does now, in addition to the rest of her life, is she is a mentor in the Freedom Group, which means there are right now 4 mentors, and they're all people like Amber who've been through the program and have had all their ups and downs, and they've learned everything and experienced all the typical things so that they now support the members. And she is a truly valued member of the team. And Amber, I'm always impressed when I pop into the forum and I see what you're writing to people and what you're telling them.
Oh, thank you.
So what's different for you? If you had to sum up how you've changed and, how you look at life differently, and not just how you eat, but that too, how you take care of yourself. How is Amber today different from Amber who first came in?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, my relationship with food and how I eat is drastically different. I'm not scared of hunger. I just know it's a natural part of life. Another thing is I'm not scared to throw food away. And I think a lot of people are scared that when they get their fullness signal and they're all done with their meal, like, what are they going to do with the food? But I'm okay with just realizing that it's okay to throw it away. I'm so much more relaxed around food too. I don't stress about it. It's not a big problem in my life. And having gotten rid of that problem, it's allowed me to look at so many other areas in my life. So being able to focus on things that I actually want to do instead of just thinking about food all the time has been the greatest gift.
So it frees up some mental space, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things is that I don't have to spend all the time that I used to looking for how to stop overeating or how to stop doing whatever I was doing at the time, or looking if there was a certain way of eating that was best. It just freed up so much more of my life to do all the other things I want to do.
And do you now plan your eating in advance at all?
Not super much, like not a lot, but I do, I always make sure that I have fresh fruits and veggies in the fridge and that I have some meals that I can go to really quickly if I'm in a rush. So I definitely plan ahead, but it's not strict and rigid like it used to be that I have to have this food at this time or food with this many calories. It's more of like a guideline plan where it's, this is where I'm planning to eat or planning to have, but it's not the end all be all.
So it's planning to help you, but not planning to set some unreasonable high expectation that you're trying to attain.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Because planning, it is super helpful, but you have to know why you're doing it. It has to be for the right reason. And I think you've really mastered that. So any last advice for anyone who's listening? We are, I'm not sure when this will air, Amber, but people can either join at certain times or they can at least be on our wait list for the Freedom Group. So what advice do you have for somebody who's thinking about it, not sure if it's for them?
Yeah, I think the Freedom Group is definitely something that can cater to a lot of different people. You don't have to be a certain way or be eating a certain way that you think might not be included. I really felt like I was able to overcome everything I needed to with the Freedom Group. And a few tidbits of advice I would say was, for me, not focusing on weight loss was really helpful, because you can say, oh, I want to lose weight, but then what? And then nothing really happens. And so it's a lot more important to focus on your actions behind weight loss and focusing on the actual eating 2 to 2 and eating foods that are helpful for you, as opposed to just saying, I want to lose weight, and making that the focus.
Right. So the weight will come when you take the right actions because you have the right kind of thinking.
Yes.
Right. But different than a diet, then you're just coming in and saying, okay, I need to lose 5 pounds in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. And another thing is, being a normal eater does not mean being a perfect eater. And that's something I had to learn the hard way, because I think a lot of people in the Freedom Group are also a little bit perfectionist. They want things to go exactly right. But being a normal eater doesn't mean that you're going to eat perfectly at every single meal exactly how you want. It just means that you have the freedom to be able to eat how you want. And it's not going to be every single day is the same, and every single day you eat perfectly at a little hungry and a little full. But it's just such a different experience than what it used to be.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because, everybody at some point, at some meal or at some holiday will eat more than their body needs in that moment. And a lot of it is learning how to deal with that and getting back to natural eating, not giving up, not beating yourself up, not thinking something's wrong with you. You're right. It does not have to be perfect. Learning anything is always going to have ups and downs.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Amber, I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story and giving hope and encouragement to other women who have similar issues or even very different issues, but who don't want to only lose weight. Many of you do. We know that. But you also want to stop the struggle, lose the whole problem. And that is exactly what we do in the group. So, Amber, thank you so much for being a part of the team.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to be a part of it.
We love having you, and we will hopefully let a lot of these listeners meet you in the Freedom Group.
Yes.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Okay, my friend, that is it for our podcast coaching session today. It's always good to hear how other people overcome a struggle that's similar to yours. Even if there are just little bits and pieces of it that you relate to, it's really important to start creating evidence for yourself, for your brain, that you are capable of change. Because our saying, if anyone else can do this and overcome a lifetime of habits and struggle, then you can too. Before I go, I want to invite you to join me in a challenge coming up very soon. It is a 5-day challenge on how to stop overeating at the end of your day. If you're anything like most of the women I work with, the bulk of your eating happens at the end of the day. It's a very common struggle. So if you relate to this struggle, I want you to imagine what it would be like if this habit no longer ruled the end of your days. If you could end this habit, a lot of your eating and weight struggle would be gone. Think about that. And that's your goal. I created this challenge to help you with this struggle. You can sign up and get more information at realweightlossrealwomen.com/challenge. And I will send you all the details. And of course, the link is in today's show notes. The challenge will be easy. It will be fun. It won't take a lot of time. And I hope that you do this for you. I hope to see you back here next week, where we will continue to work on your emotional eating and that habitual overeating step by step until they both become something you used to do. We know that is your ultimate goal, right? So for now, this is your Coach Cookie reminding you that as you search for answers, keep it real, just like you. And I'll see you back here next week.